Hello and welcome back to the On The Ball podcast. This is episode 117 of the show and we are back here again to talk about the NRL. Look, gotta be brutally honest, I'm once again here by myself. I'll probably stop promising that I'll get on guests, but I'll try my best. But I will stop promising it because I have failed to deliver on my promise about 3 weeks in a row. So at the moment it's just me. As the cricket season wraps up, I'll get more organised over the weekends, and that way I can probably organise guests on. But at the moment it'll just be me. I didn't get to watch too much of the action as I was busy with cricket Saturday and Sunday. But I obviously caught the Thursday and Friday games and watched the highlights or replays of the other ones. So it was a pretty good round of footy. Obviously, sadly, but we'll just get straight into our winners and losers. The biggest loser probably being the amount of injuries there were. Sadly for fans of many clubs, their favourite players went down over the weekend with serious injuries. Just to reel off a couple of them. Dylan Edwards has gone for a month. Jeremy Marshall-King 6 to 8 weeks. Sione Katoa 4 to 6 weeks. Tarpany and Curtis Scott both injured, not sure how long. And in that same team, Sebastian Chris and Ryan James are yet to be confirmed. They were picked, but they're not sure if they're going to pass their test yet. Ben Hunt is also injured. Lockie Lamb out for 6 to 8 weeks. Luke Keary gone for the year, which is clearly the biggest one, but that was pretty awful to watch. Lindsay Collins out with concussion, and Peter Hiku as well, gone for a month. So a lot of big names there, a lot of crowd favourites. So that's really going to hurt a few teams, in particular the Roosters. Just was a bit of a sour note for the weekend because apart from that, there was some good footy played. And it's sad to see. Unfortunately, it's always going to happen in a contact sport, but it just sucks when they're really serious injuries. Like, the injuries are bound to happen, but when they're 1 to 2 weeks, you can kind of put up with it. But when it's season-ending injuries like Kiri's, you do have to feel for them on a personal level because that would be pretty horrible, really, when you can't do the thing you love for a year. Like, yes, people would say, oh, who cares, he's getting paid a lot. But I'm sure they just want to be out there on the park cutting shape. So shout out to all those boys getting injured. Hopefully they come back better than ever. In terms of the talk about whether there should be an 18th man, I'm unsure about it. Like, I'm going to be sitting on the fence here because I know they'll bring it in and it's basically just going to turn into a bench with 5 players because straight away, it's not their fault, fair enough, for pushing the boundaries of the rules, but blokes like Bellamy and Robinson, they're just going to be testing the boundaries of that rule, and the 18th man will basically just turn into a 5th bench player, and I don't think we really want to see that. I think a lot of the rules over the last 10 years has been trying to eliminate the big players who just come on for 10, 15 minutes like Nelson was at one point. Now he plays, a lot more minutes, and I'll respect that, but allowing a 5th player in the interchange would do exactly that. However, I do think there should be a rule. Not many of these were caused by foul play, to be fair, but I do think there should be a rule that if a player is injured through foul play, I do believe that the player, and they're gone for the game, like say someone coat hangers someone, that player gets injured for the rest of the match. I reckon the person who coat hangers them should have to go off as well. And yes, I know you can argue, well then that's just unlucky because someone who coat hangers someone else and they bounce off fine doesn't get injured, but I just think that's the most fair way to go about it because realistically, why wouldn't you just intentionally knock someone's best player out with a high tackle, try and break their jaw or something? Like, I know it's pretty awful thoughts, but in a big game, there's not really much stopping you, and especially if you're a lesser known player, if you just get sin-binned or something, that's not much of a punishment. So I think that rule should be brought in, but in terms of an 18th man, I'm definitely not sold on it unless they've brought it in the AFL, a 23rd man, so if that succeeds with flying colours, I think that's maybe something we could bring in. But yeah, especially in NRL, it's a different game to AFL. I think they would be able to basically not get the most out of it, but they'd be able to use it in ways that it wasn't intended to when the rule was created or thought of. So I don't think the 18th man is the way to go. But yeah, it's just a shame that many injuries happened in one weekend. Pretty sour, left a sour taste in most NRL fans' mouths. I talked about the Roosters. I'll touch on them first. They're probably the biggest loser coming out of the weekend. Lost to the arch enemy in South Sydney. It was a pretty good game, especially in the first half. Souths were all over them. Friday night footy, it was great to have it back with two big teams going at it. Like, we kind of got used to a lot of Broncos action last year in Friday night footy, so it's good to have two really good teams going toe-to-toe. And yeah, the Roosters first test of the season, and they just did not look up to it. South looked way better than them. However, I don't think the Roosters played that bad, and there wasn't much to be concerned about from that side of things, in my opinion, for their performance on Friday night. I think it was just a bit of an off night for them, but we know the Roosters don't really hit peak form till later on the season, which I know sounds weird after two 40-point wins in round 1 and 2, but that's just the truth behind the situation. And the Rabbitohs are a really good team, so no shame in going down to them. And at the end of the day, they lost by 2 tries and had 3 players out for the majority of the second half, so including 2 halves. So I thought it was a pretty good effort from the Roosters, even though blokes like my dad were saying how bad they were. But yeah, it's obviously going to be tough from here for the Roosters to go on to win a premiership. Kiri's out for the season. Lachie Lamb is out for 6 to 8 weeks. They're now going to be rolling with the combination of Drew Hutchison and Sam Walker for the near future. I don't know. I think Adam Kieran's injured. I don't know if he's in the plans when he comes back. But yeah, it's a pretty inexperienced halves partnership. It's going to be interesting to see how they go this week against the Warriors. I'll touch on that matchup towards the end of the episode. But yeah, pretty grim weekend for the Roosters. Probably the only positives are that Victor Radley's back this week. But yeah, I don't think that really makes up for Kiri being out for the season. And yeah, I don't really like talking about it because I feel bad for the guys, but yeah, hopefully he comes back in 2022 better than ever. Moving on to, I'll touch on my final losers because I normally go winners first, try and keep it positive, but we've basically gone through all the losers here, so I'll touch on them and then we can get into the more positive stuff. I've just grouped the Cowboys, Bulldogs and Manly all together. The 3 bottom feeders at the moment, all winless so far in 2021. And they just look like they're a long way off the pace of the rest of the competition. We saw the Tigers get their first win. The Dragons notched up their second win. The Broncos also, in the end, had a pretty impressive win in terms of the score against the Bulldogs. And yeah, it's just not looking great. These 3 teams look like they're going to be a fair way off 13th place, and they're just going to be battling it out for 14th place unless something changes quickly. If we're going to look at the 3 teams in terms of what's wrong, it's all in attack, really. I know they've been conceding a lot of points, but the Cowboys have scored 26. The Bulldogs have scored 16 across 3 matches, and the Seagulls have scored 28. So you're not going to be winning many games of footy when you're averaging less than 10 points a match. And I know some of them have played fairly good teams to start the season. I know Manly played the Roosters and Souths in the first 2, but they were pretty disappointing on Friday night against the Dragons. Looking forward, the Cowboys have the Sharks, the Bulldogs have the Bunnies, and the Seagulls have the Panthers. So I think we could well and truly be talking about them, all 3 of them being 0-4 next week. And at this stage, it looks like they're just going to be, their only relevance to the season will be trying to avoid the wooden spoon. I do think things might change for Manly. I know he's just one player, but when Tom Turbo does come back, they usually do look like a different team, as we saw at the start of the last season. So we'll probably have to hold judgment on the Seagulls completely till then, but at the moment they look absolutely awful. The Cowboys look really bad, but I keep harping on about them week in, week out, so I'll lay off them this week. And then the Bulldogs, I thought they were a chance to beat the Broncos on the weekend. They were solid in the first half in terms of defence, held the Broncos to 2 points, but then in the second half just got completely opened up by a Broncos team that in other weeks have looked pretty impotent. So yeah, a lot of losers this week, but mainly those 3 teams and the Roosters, and obviously all the injured players. But moving on to the more positive side of footy, the winners. For me, the biggest winner was the Panthers. They beat the Storm without Nathan Cleary and Apisai Coruscant, which in itself is an incredible feat. I think they beat Melbourne as well last year on a Friday night, if I remember correctly. So yes, they did lose the grand final to them, and that would be the main thing they think about when they think of the Storm. But it does seem in the regular season they do have a bit of wood over the perennial champions, really, the Storm. Great finish to that game. Obviously, Justin Olam tried to score himself. Probably should have passed it to the Fox. Kick-out came from out of nowhere to hold him up. Great game. Everyone in my lounge room was screaming in that last 10 minutes. I couldn't really sit down. I was so into it. So that was awesome. Matty Burton was probably a highlight, stepping in at halfback for Nathan Cleary, and he showed his class putting up those 70-metre torpedoes. I don't know how many kicking meters he got, but he must have got a fair few because he was regularly putting it 60, 70 and really putting the Storm on the back foot at the start of their sets. Dylan Edwards was really good, actually. I've never really been the biggest fan of Dylan Edwards. I always thought he was a little bit overrated, but just looked good because he was in a good side. But the back end of last year and the start of this season, I'm starting to respect what he brings to the team. And I thought his first half against the Storm was one of his best. And unfortunately, he went off at halftime with an injury, and now he's out for a month, which sucks for them, especially considering they let Caleb Aikens go in the off-season. But I'm sure, actually, I don't know who they've picked there, to be honest. I haven't investigated the team lineup, so I assume it's Charlie Staines, but I'm not 100% sure. They did play Tyrone May there in the second half on the weekend, and Stephen Crichton can also play there, but I assume it's Charlie Staines. So he'll be missed. Brian To'o was back to his best. He had 78 post-contact meters, and yeah, he's just an absolute beast of a winger. Yo and Kickout really led from the front with the forwards. We're used to it being Fisher Harris, but those two really were awesome. Yo in the middle and Kickout on the outside, and Spencer Leniu played really well. However, I know NRL's not the same without the aggression, but I do think Panthers, similar to like the Eels do, I think sometimes they do overstep the line when it comes to aggression, and I think Leniu, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I think he does it a bit too often, if I'm honest. He seems like he's a bit of a grub, but fair play to him. He played pretty well. But yeah, that hit on Eisenhuth, in my opinion, that wasn't a penalty, I don't believe, and I genuinely think he should have been suspended. I believe Eisenhuth broke his ribs, and yeah, it was just so unnecessary. He'd basically stopped in the tackle, and it's just such a coward shot. So yeah, I'm pretty disappointed in the referees for not picking that up, or the match review panel, but he was also on the receiving end of a nasty tackle from Munster, which I believe was completely accidental, but yeah, I'll probably just hold my peace there because it sounds like I'm just attacking the bloke now. So they were the biggest winners coming out of that one, and look likely premiers basically for the season, have come out of the block so well. Next up, I've got the Warriors. Shout out to Bung. If you are listening, you were very keen for this one. Came from 5 tries to 2 down against Canberra in Canberra. I don't know what they would have been paying because I was playing cricket at the time, but they did say must have been paying upwards of $10 at that stage. And then they just went on an absolute tear. Couldn't stop scoring in that second half. Adam Pompey scored in the 77th minute to put them in front, and then Roger Tuivasa-Sheck had a try saver on Rapana in the corner, and that was enough for them to get over Canberra. And what I was just really impressed by was most of their wins in last season was they would complete it, 90-95%, score 18 points, and it would be enough to beat the other team. However, on the weekend, they scored 34 points and only completed it at 75%. And I know that sounds like applauding them for being worse, but I think that's a sign of a really good team when your ball handling or your discipline might not be as good one day, but you can still go out and put up a lot of points. It's something like the Rabbitohs do a lot. Roger was just an absolute freak, and I know it's his last year in the game, and I know he's won a Dally M medal, but I still think that this bloke is underrated personally. I think, yes, he's a well-known name because he's probably easily the biggest name in the Warriors franchise since Shaun Johnson left, but I do think if he played in a Sydney team or a Brisbane team, he'd be that much more, he'd just be praised so much more. I think people think of Tedesco and Pappenhausen and even maybe someone like a Gutherson in a completely different light, where for me, Roger's right up there with the very best. I'm not saying he's the best, but on his day, like he was on Saturday, there's not many you could put over him. He had 101 post-contact meters. 101 meters in a game is fairly decent by itself, let alone post-contact. He had 10 tackle breaks, which is just freakish, and 6 offloads. That's incredible. That's basically just giving his team an extra set off his own back. Mamalo and Fusatua were back to their best. I think they've been pretty down the last couple of seasons, but they were back to their ball-carrying, strong, tall, big, best they're just a tough duo to face on the wings. And Fanua Blake showed why the Warriors were so keen to get him down. He showed why he's one of the best props in the game. Absolutely killed it. So yeah, well done to the Warriors. And I'm looking forward to getting behind them really going forward. I think they're a very likeable team, which I will get into in a second. But my final winner are my team, the Mighty West Tigers. Got their first win of the year against the Newcastle Knights. When I looked at their draw, I basically just wrote off the first month. I thought they weren't going to win any of them. Obviously, I had very tough first two matches against the Raiders and the Roosters and went down convincingly in both, but upset the Knights in Newcastle in Mitchell Pearce's 300th. A David Nofaluma winner in the 72nd minute was enough to get the chocolates on the day. And Dewey's kicking was actually the difference. He went 4 from 4, which is something that the Tigers have struggled with for so long now. I can't even think the last time we didn't have kicking issues, maybe since Pat Richards. And that was a big reason why we won the game, because Tex Hoy kicked 2 from 4. So both teams actually scored the same amount of tries. And after a tough start to the year, as I mentioned earlier, they now have the Eels on Easter Monday, which is a very tough fixture. Tigers historically have not been great against the Eels, especially on Easter Monday or at Bankwest. Then they have the Cowboys, winless Cowboys I might add. Then they have the Rabbitohs, another tough one. But then they have the Sea Eagles, another winless team. And then the Dragons, who right now are 2-1. But I do think they're just in a little purple patch, and I don't think they're going to... And they've played some easy teams, really. They've beaten the Cowboys and the Sea Eagles, I believe. So I don't think they're actually as good as their record suggests. So I reckon the Tigers can easily beat the Cowboys. Not easily, but it's certainly in the realm of possibility that they beat the Cowboys, Sea Eagles, and Dragons. And that would see them, even if they lose to the Eels and Rabbitohs, which is most likely going to happen, that would actually see them 4-4 after round 8. And they've played, 4 of the top 6 teams in the competition, maybe 5 of the top 7 if you're going to include the Knights. So I think that would definitely be a great start for the Tigers, and then they can really start to attack in the Origin period. Obviously not too many Tigers players, if any. I don't think any actually play Origin. So I don't know what the Origin schedule's like this year. I don't know if players will be missing games, but they could be a dangerous team to play throughout that period, as they will all be fresh and ready to go. And yeah, they just look like a different team with Dewey at 5'8". I know Dewey played in round 2, but I think second game under the belt with that spine combination, it looks like it's starting to be a little bit better. Yes, there's still some issues there, but yeah, good win at the end of the day. Can't really ask for much more when you're 0-2. Or any way you can get the points is a good way. So well done to my West Tigers. Alright, moving on to my predicted top 8. Today's probably going to be a shorter episode, just quietly, because I'm under a bit of time pressure to record this. But by changes to the top 8, I've actually made a fair few this week. I thought it'd be a bit of a boring segment if I just keep it the exact same every week, but I actually genuinely believe these changes are feasible. The Roosters I had third last week after a great start to the year, and obviously the amount of injuries that occurred. Now they're going to be playing with a new halves pairing for, the rest of the season, but 2 new halves for the next 6 to 8 weeks. And I've actually dropped them down to 7th. I just think the rest of their team's fairly old, and they're still going to be a good team. They should still be able to put away the bad sides, but I just don't think they're going to be able to compete with the top guys, while Sam Walker and Drew Hutchinson are there commanding the team around. So I've got them dropping down to 7th. Panthers, I've lifted them from 4th to 3rd after a good win over the Storm. I've still got the Storm and Rabbitohs 1 and 2. I'm holding thick on those two. I've leapfrogged the Eels over the Raiders, so the Raiders are still in 5th for me. I've pushed the Eels up into 4th. I don't believe the Eels will be a force in September, if I'm going to be brutally honest. However, I do think they are a very good regular season team who beats the teams they need to beat, and then they can, as we saw against the Storm in round 2, they can put up an upset against the bigger guys. So I do think they will be a top 4 team at the moment. I've actually lifted the Titans, who absolutely crunched the Cowboys on Sunday night. I think they scored 44 points up in Townsville. I've lifted them from 8th to 6th. Similar thing to the Eels. I just think they've reached that stage now. I don't think they're going to have an impact in September, but I think they've reached that level where they will beat pretty much every team below them, or who they should be expected to beat, and then they'll add a couple scalps along with that, and that'll be enough to get them pretty high in that top 8. I've dropped the Knights from 7th to 8th following that loss to the Tigers. So they are my changes. No new teams into the top 8. I think the guys outside the top 8 still need to show me a little bit more. Probably a bit harsh on the Warriors, but I'm not convinced that one of these 8 are going to miss out just yet. But that could all change in the following weeks. Alright, next up we have a new segment. It's called the List segment. I brought it in the AFL episode I recorded yesterday, but what I'm going to be doing is each week I'm going to think of a topic and I'm just going to come with a list. It might be a top 5, top 3, I might rank the whole competition, I might bring a top 10, etc, etc. It just depends on the topic. This week I'm doing most likeable teams. So who are the most likeable teams in the NRL? This is obviously completely subjective, depends a lot on who you follow or how old you are, because I know some people, like, you know, for example, hate Manly because they just bought a lot of players in the 90s and stuff like that. But I'm going who I believe are the 5 most likeable teams. I'm leaving my West Tigers out of it because I'm obviously biased towards them, so I don't know what people's opinions are of them. And I'm also putting in my top 5 least favourite teams. So I hope you enjoy this. Comment down below if you agree or disagree with me, or who your most hated or most liked teams, apart from the team you support, are. Alright, most likeable teams. Number 5, I'm going the Titans. Purely because I think they're just a pretty harmless team. So I like them enough for them not to be in between hated and liked. I do like them. I like their players. I like some of their signings in the off-season. I like Holbrook as a coach. I like their stadium. I've been to their stadium a couple times. It's a nice place. And don't mind their colours. I know I'm saying some pretty random reasoning right now, but this is dead set what goes into it. But yeah, more importantly, they just haven't really done anything to piss anyone off, I don't think. They've been pretty irrelevant for most of their time in the NRL. They were pretty decent at the start with, you know, Preston Campbell, Scott Prince and stuff. But they haven't really had a long enough history to forge any big rivalries or hatreds towards any fan bases, I'd say. So I think that would be a pretty regular pick in your top 5s. But they're my number 5. Number 4, I'm going to the Rabbitohs, which is probably controversial from a Tigers fan because, you know, Balmain and South, arguably one of the biggest rivalries in NRL history. But I do like the Rabbitohs, and my dad always says this: if the Tigers were for some reason be banned from the competition forever tomorrow, he'd probably start going for the Rabbitohs. They're just a likeable team, got a good fan base, classic jersey with the green and red, myrtle and green stripes. Wait, is the myrtle the green part or the red? I swear or is it myrtle and burgundy? Oh, I'm looking like a phony here, but I'm going to say myrtle and green, but I feel like the green could be called myrtle. I don't know, I'm getting confused, but yeah, green and red stripes for lack of a better term. So yeah, I just like them, like the way they play. Like, I didn't like Supercoach Wayne Bennett, but I think I respect him a lot more now, the way he's coached the Rabbitohs. He lets them just play their natural game, which I highly respect. So they're my number 4. My number 3 is the New Zealand Warriors. Similar to the Titans, I think they're a pretty harmless team. Haven't been good for a while, and when they are good, they're very exciting. Usually play scintillating footy. They're stereotypically pretty big, pretty fast, like to throw the ball around, which is always good to watch. And yeah, that's basically enough said for the Warriors. Number 2, I've gone the Knights. I've been recently grinding the 257 Collective podcast. If you don't know, that's Connor Watson and Kalen Ponga's podcast. They get a lot of the other Knights boys involved as well. It's really cool. They just seem like a really cool bunch of guys, to be honest. I like the fact that they're in New South Wales, but they're outside of Sydney. They have their own little community there in Newcastle. They've got a cool stadium, a nice size. They get pretty solid attendance out, even at the worst of times. Good colours. Yeah, I just like their players, likeable team. And yeah, I just think the Knights overall, I don't think they're easily hated, I'd say. And number 1, I've gone with the Raiders. The Canberra Raiders are my favourite team outside of the Tigers. I don't know why, I've just got an affinity with the Raiders. Ever since like Blake Austin left from the Tigers to the Raiders, I've been a big fan of them. They do smash us pretty regularly, so I probably shouldn't like them as much as I do, but something about their green jersey, similar to the Newcastle team playing in ACT's not New South Wales, but you know what I mean. not being a Queensland team, but not being in Sydney. They've got the Viking Club. They've got good fans, good sized stadium. It doesn't look empty. It looks full most times. I like watching the game at Canberra. I like Ricky Stewart's loose value, even though he reportedly abused Henry Perenara, which is pretty disgusting. So yeah, they're my most likeable team outside of the Tigers. Now moving on to my top 5 most hated teams. Now look, this is subjective and it can change week by week really. Any incident can change it. So if your team is mentioned, don't unsubscribe. Take it as a feather in your cap that I don't like your team because maybe they win too much or something like that. And feel free to hate me or the Tigers for me mentioning it. But here we go. Number 5, I'm going the Brisbane Broncos. A few reasons. Mainly, I used to live in Brisbane, so I'd go watch Brisbane, and they'd pretty much beat every team. I lived there between 2006 and 2013, and they pretty much made finals every single year then, and I think they actually did, and they used to just beat pretty much every team except for like the Storm, and on the odd occasion the Tigers would get up, but pretty rarely. So I didn't like them, as you usually don't like the teams that just win all the time. I also, when I think of Brisbane, I think of Queensland. As a New South Wales fan, I obviously hate that fact. A lot of Brisbane players often overlap into the Queensland side. I don't like that Brisbane has one team. I think it's pretty unfair when Sydney has 8 teams. So it's no surprise that they produced, or do they have 8 teams or do they have more? I actually don't know off the top of my head. But it's no surprise that they produce as much talent as they do, or you'd hope they do. So yeah, I can't lie. I'm not minding them being on the bottom right now or struggling. They won on the weekend, so they're not on the bottom of the ladder, but you know what I mean. But they are obviously good for the game. One of the biggest teams, biggest fan base in Australia, according to social media, I believe. So well done to the Broncos for that. But yeah, not the biggest fan of them. Number 4, I've got the Roosters. I think they would be in most people's top 5 hated. Obviously famous for being a very rich club. Can pretty much entice any player they want in the competition to go. Not suggesting they cheat the salary cap or anything, but it's a pretty attractive offer playing for the Roosters. You get to have recovery sessions at Bondi and stuff like that. Live in the eastern suburbs, and yeah, I just don't like. Part of me respects their free agency, the way they go about it, but I just don't like. Especially it hurts that they got Teddy, but yeah, I just don't like the way they win so much. Pretty much that's what it boils down to. But yeah, I think my reasons for that is pretty understandable. Number 3, I've probably got a rogue one here. I don't reckon they're very hateable, but the Sharks. Something about the Sharks, when I watch them play, they're just like a bit of a rat pack. They've got a lot of loose units. Like last year they used to have Dugan, Fafita, Ronaldo's one of the biggest grubs in the game. Hamlin Ueli, he's not that bad, but you know what I mean. So yeah, I think they're pretty grubby. Sean Johnson just does not fit in, I have to say, and Matt Moylan. Both of them are pretty clean-cut guys. And they're in a bunch of rats, like Talakai as well. He's a scary bloke. Oh, what's that other guy's name? Royce Hunt. They're all pretty big. They're all big. They're all scary. They're all tatted up. They just seem like a bit of a rat pack, and they always like to get into a few fights with the Tigers. And they also went through a phase where they'd just pick off Tigers players, which hurt to see. And they're also drug cheats, which I know they claim their innocence for that, but at the end of the day, they got suspended. So I think I can say that without getting cancelled. Number 2, I'm going the Panthers. This has probably only risen up in the last few years. I just think they come across as a very arrogant team. They're very good to watch, and I respect what they're doing there. I like, similar to Newcastle, they seem to have their own little community out in the western suburbs. They just get behind the Panthers. They get a healthy crowd to every game, so I respect that. But yeah, just not very likeable, especially from a Tigers fan. Actually, I probably should have them number 1, to be honest, after that bloody Ivan Cleary incident last year. I think that's the most angry I've ever been in NRL. From an NRL match, so I'm not the biggest fan of Ivan. I don't mind Nathan Cleary, although I feel for him with the shapes that his head is cutting. Actually, he polishes the turd pretty well. Probably pulls well, and I shouldn't say that. He probably does well for himself, and he probably is a good-looking rooster at the end of the day. But yeah, Jerome Luai, Stephen Crichton, all of those guys, they're pretty aggressive the way they play. They're right on the edge, like Spencer Leniu, as we saw on Thursday night. I thought he was a bit of a dog. So yeah, And also they're good now, so that makes them easier to hate. But number one, I'm going the Parramatta Eels. Something about just getting smashed by the Eels on Easter Monday, it just riles me up. I just don't like them. Mitchell Moses is a big factor behind that. He comes across very arrogant and not disrespectful. I'm sure he's a good bloke, but he just doesn't... I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I just don't like him. They also similarly have quite a few dogs in their team. I don't like Micah Sevo. I don't like Blake Ferguson. Michael Jennings is a drug cheat and used to play for them. And yeah, I just don't think that they're a very likeable team either. King Gutho, I respect him. But apart from that, Nathan Brown's absolute dog. So yeah, that's probably that weird segment really. I've just turned about 40,000 plus on me, but oh well. I'm not going to do the players of the week section this week because A, I didn't watch too many games in full, and B, I'm pressed for time, so I'm going to be making my week 4 predictions. Sure bet of the week, there's quite a few this week that are pretty easy. Tips, I think there's 3 games where the favourite is under $1.10, which you don't see pretty regularly. But the one I'm most confident in is the Storm to beat the Broncos at Amy Park on Friday night. Pappenhausen is back for the Storm. It's in Melbourne, and the Storm won't lose 3 in a row. That's really enough said. Upset of the week, there's 2 I really like here. Warriors to beat the Roosters. Yes, it's probably like the stupid thing to do just to go and back someone against the Roosters because they've got a new halves pairing, but I honestly think the Warriors, this is the kind of game they could win, a team that's probably unsettled after last weekend's injuries. And yeah, I just think the Warriors are a chance to knock them off, really. It would be tough for them to get up for 2 big upsets in a row, but they were doing that kind of stuff last season, so I can't see why they can't do it. The other team I like is the Titans to beat the Raiders. This is playing in Cogra. This has been played in Cogra. If it was at Gold Coast, I'd be more confident. But maybe the preparation could affect both teams. Obviously, their schedules must have changed. The Raiders are injury affected with Joseph Tarpany and Curtis Scott out. Harley Smith-Shields got injured in the New South Wales Cup. Sebastian Kris and Ryan James could also still be out. Meanwhile, the Titans went through pretty unscathed in terms of the injury front. And yeah, I think the Titans could get up for this one. They haven't been tested really from a top 6 team just yet. They've played the Warriors, the Broncos, and the Cowboys. So they should really get up for this one, their first big test of the season, to see whether they cut the mustard, as they say. Is that a saying? I actually have no idea. But yeah, I'm liking both of those teams. So if I had to pick one of the 2, I think the Titans is the safer one. I think it's more likely. But if I actually had to put money on it, I'd probably go the Warriors because I legit think they're a chance. But I think that's more risky. I don't know. I feel like I've just contradicted myself there 40,000 times. But anyway, play on. 6 again. Game spread, the betting lines I like here. I like obviously the Titans and Roosters at plus 4.5 and plus 6.5. The Warriors to get a converted try margin as well is very tasty. So if you don't want to back them head to head, you can also back them on the line at $1.90 with those handicaps. The Sharks at minus 8.5 against the Cowboys. Look, I'm scared to tip against the teams that are winless because there's just going to be one week where they just whip out their first win because no team really goes winless in the NRL. But the Sharks at minus 8.5. If it was like minus 12, I probably would steer clear. But I think a margin of 10, 12, 14, I think that's pretty reasonable for this game. So I'm liking the Sharks against the Cowboys there by more than 9 points. And then the Knights versus the Dragons. I'm actually surprised. I guess they're also the Tigers, but minus 7.5. Dragons have Ben Hunt and Jack Bird out, 2 pretty key figures. Ben Hunt got injured, and the Knights I don't think have any outs of note. Kalen Pong is not back just yet, I don't believe, but for them to be minus 7.5, I think that's pretty tasty value. It is also Newcastle, so I like their chances there. But that's going to be it for today's episode. Another shorter one. I know I keep promising you this, but I will now have Sundays free. So I promise to get the podcast more organised. I'm going to try and get them out on Tuesdays instead of Wednesdays or Thursdays. I'll also be watching more NRL, obviously, as I have Sundays free now. So I will be able to give you more analysis in terms of tactics and stuff like that. Hopefully we'll be able to get some guests on And yeah, just kind of keen for the cricket season to be over for the podcast purpose. But yeah, thanks for joining me, listening and watching. If you have so far, channel's seen a bit of growth in the last couple of weeks, which has been pretty exciting. I've not been too sure what the future of this channel is, or this podcast is, but I've always wanted to really have a crack at the NRL and AFL season in full, because that's, my local audience. So it's good to see some, well, not rewards, but you know what I mean. It's good to see that there is some interest in it. So keep tuning in if you are enjoying it. Like, subscribe to the podcast, follow us on the podcasting platforms, get around us on social media, and we'll see you same time, well, hopefully earlier time next week. I might actually do it before the Easter Monday clash, so I can have it out on Tuesday, but we'll see. Enjoy the Easter weekend, enjoy the Easter weekend footy more importantly, and go the Tigers. Thanks for listening. Cheers.